Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Barnabas Brushes here on the Elite Encounters channel. My name is Patrick. I play the character of Barnabas on the Elite Encounters Pathfinder 2nd Edition campaign Soul Severed, which you can catch every Tuesday on Twitch here on this same channel at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So check the show out. If you like what you see here in the miniatures, they're used in the show that we use for our live play in a unique homebrew world called Iota Dree. Come check us out. Today, I'm going to be painting some miniatures that I've been asked to paint for one of the shows on the channel. These minis are from the Epic Encounters line. You can see some of their branding here. These are some really cool sculpts. They produce a number of miniatures and miniature sets that come with their own kind of themed encounters. They have a nice little flip mat in there to use, and also a little pre-written adventure that you can use, typically written for other RPGs that we don't play here at Elite Encounters, but easily converted into Pathfinder. So the figure I'm going to be working on today is a little dude called the Iron Skull Duelist. Probably, here we go, let's try that. The Iron Skull Duelist. Okay, so they're all statted out in the little booklet for your adventure. The sculpt themselves, the Iron Skull Duelist, they come like this. So you can see here he's a little 28 millimeter figure, so medium-sized creature in your typical Pathfinder RPG. And this sculpt jumped out at me right away. I don't know if you can see it on the camera there, but the poor little dude has at least a quarter of his cranium just lopped off, exposing his brain pan. It might be kind of hard to see on the sculpt itself. This is what it looks like right out of the box. Uh, so not a whole lot of detail that you could see on these right away. You can tell he's got a cloak. He's drawing a sword out of a scabbard, maybe. He's got some rotting pants on and a kind of a decrepit leather breastplate and this cloak. The technique that I'm going to use to paint this guy today is something that is kind of catching on in the painting world. Typically, classically, what we would do is we would prime this, and then we would give it base coats in various colors. We would, choose what colors we're going to paint each piece of the model, and then we would build up in layers from darkest shadows of the figure in 3 dimensions outward to the highest highlights, typically with a top-down light source. That takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. And if you have a lot of figures that you need to paint rapidly, it's not conducive to getting nice painted figures out on the table. And you want to do that. You want your figures to look nice. Thankfully, a lot of companies have come along with some paints that speed up the process and create this layered effect in one coat. So the paints I'm going to be using today to do that are speed paints. Those are produced by the Army Painter, and I have the full line of the speed paints at my disposal here. In order to get these speed paints or contrast paints or whatever the brand that you're going to use to really work and really pop and show the vibrant colors that they're capable of showing, you're going to have to usually underpaint or underprime to get these to really pop. I've experimented with these, and on an unprimed mini, if it's got a nice light gray or white, you could go right to the speed paint. But to me, they end up looking a little too bright, and for my taste, a little too cartoony. I prefer a little bit of gritty reality to my figures, make them look like they're lived in, that these figures live in the world that they're representing on the table. So what we do, instead of painting right to the unprimed mini, we start off with a black prime, right? Our darkest prime. I use black. Some people will prime in earth tones. So they'll go from like a dark brown to a really light tan, maybe all the way to an off-white to kind of get this, what I'm going to show you here in a minute, called a slap chop or grisaille style priming. But you can see that even with a black prime, uh, it might be hard to see on the screen, but you can start to see a little bit more of the detail. At least to my eye, I can start to make out the 3 dimensions. Hey Laura, welcome aboard. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in. What we're going to do with that then is a technique called in the painting world. I'm not sure who invented this, but they refer to it as slap chop because it's a multi-layer dry brushing prime technique that builds and underpaints the layers in the priming that ultimately will lead to uh, a figure like this. So this started out with the black prime that I just showed you, and then this has been slap chopped up to really pop out the details. Now you can see the guy's skull, you can see his eye sockets. You'll see here, Laura, it's actually not a whole lot of work. I'm going to slap chop this guy here right here for the show. Hey, welcome aboard, Blaze Ego. Nice to see you. So you can see in this guy, maybe I'll move him up a little bit closer to the camera, let it focus. You could see his eye sockets. You could see his little, where his nasal bones were. You could see maybe some teeth are starting to define. This guy's got a lot of cool details. He's got a little cravat. So this guy was clearly some kind of uh, light duelist before he met his demise by having half of his head lopped off. And you could see there, even his brain pan has really started to pop out in the detail of the sculpt. Yeah, we knew that. So you could see like the details, like the layering of his cloak have popped out, the wrinkles in his leather boots have popped out, the holes in his rotting pants have started to pop out with this technique. Huh, I don't know how that would work, a slap chop bomb. Let me think. Like maybe it explodes and deals a bunch of slashing damage. Uh, I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. At 7th level, Barnabas is going to take, well, I shouldn't give you any spoilers, but he'll be capable of inventing his own formula soon enough. And I know that there have been some requests for some interesting formulas already from our audience, so I plan on incorporating those as soon as I can do so within the rules, right? Okay. So again, we're starting out, like I said, with this base model, this base plastic model from the Epic Encounters line. Um, we'll start off with a black prime. I've done that ahead of time in the show. The primer I use is just a Vallejo primer. This is a polyurethane primer that just brushes on. Some people can thin this and put this in their airbrush and airbrush prime, which gives you a nice even coat all the way around the miniature. I like to brush prime because I don't like to miss any spots and I like getting right up close and personal, so I brush prime on these guys. Takes a tiny bit longer, but yes, the Baja Blast might be on the horizon, Laura, coming soon. You just have to make sure you stay tuned and see Barnabas get to the appropriate level to be able to start inventing his own formula soon enough. All right, so with this black model here, this black primed model, I should say, it doesn't come black. It comes in the kind of off-white plastic. I'm going to do a slap chop technique. And the way I do that is I'll start off with a medium gray prime. The medium gray prime is going to start building the layers on the underpaint and start defining what this figure looks like. Anytime I prime this, I want to consider my light source in the natural world, right? So a lot of times people are just going to prime and paint as if they, hey there, John Sierra, Volcano Man, nice to see you. I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to paint this guy, this poor bastard with half his head lopped off here. Uh, I'm pretty I'm pretty excited to see how this guy comes out. And I got a few of them, so I'm going to experiment with some colors. Yeah, Laura, I think that's a great idea if you want to pop us into the to art. The title is Barnabas Brushes. It should be in the stream title already. Barnabas Brushes, episode one. A bone to pick. I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see how that looks. The title should be updated for you here in just a second, Laura. But if you do want to add the art category, that would be great. And if you can find like a miniature painting category, I wasn't able to set that up. So again, we want to consider our light source, which in miniature painting world, you typically want to think that your light source is above your miniature and kind of pointing down at it, like the sun would be at high noon or afternoon. Nice. Thanks, John Sear, for pointing that out. Appreciate it. So considering that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my medium gray primer and I'm going to brush with a downward stroke to highlight the raised areas of the model all the way around the figure to really start popping what the details are on this model. Okay. And some of you may notice that I'm wearing gloves, so this is for protection. So like Lenny says, always wear your protection when you're going to get messy. All right, so the primer I use for this, and I have it's a much bigger bottle because I go through a lot more of this, is again, I use a Vallejo polyurethane acrylic mix. This is just their gray or medium gray primer. No worries, Laura, I think our title is still up. Oh no, Lenny, please tell me, please tell me that you are properly using prophylaxis. All right, so just going to dump a little bit of this out in a palette over here off camera. And to dry brush this on, there are official dry brushes on the market out there from various manufacturers. You can find them in your hobby stores. For me, I just use some old makeup blending brushes that you can get anywhere. Uh, any retail store, you can grab these for uh, a fraction of the price of official dry brushes. They're a nice kind of flat, soft bristle. You can kind of see the profile of the brush there. Uh, and they got some nice flexibility to them. So when you gather your paint, I like how I'm blinking out on my green screen every time my arm moves. Uh, but the flexibility is going to allow you the nice dry brushing and texturing with this. So to dry brush, what I'll do, I'm just going to get a paper towel here. Because what you want to do is you want to gather up some paint on the ends of your brush here, like so. Just enough to kind of wet the tips of the brush, just the tip, right there, Lenny. And then you're going to just brush it all off on your paper towel. Just get it almost all off. Okay, so that no more color comes off the brush when you're brushing the towel there. Okay, the brush looks clean, but when we actually grab our model here, and to do this, I'm going to use a holder for my figure so I can see the full thing. So I got this cool little holder here that clips onto the base. Okay, and then I'm just going to start brushing down on the model. And you can see details already starting to pop out. Just a nice, easy downward brush, top down. And with this medium gray, we want to almost completely cover that black shadow that we cast. I think I'm going to let go of the holder here actually because it's sometimes these things will pop open when you're putting a significant pressure on your figure. So I'm just going to use my fingers here, again with proper protection. So what looked like a clean brush, you can see now is creating these layers. Some areas that I want a higher highlight to pop, I might apply more pressure. And areas I want to keep shadowed, I'll just kind of lightly go over. Okay, so you can already see the details in the skull are starting to pop out here. You can see details in his armor, like these little epaulettes that are coming out from underneath his cloak. He's got little cloak clasps on the top here. They're already starting to show themselves to you. So what I'm kind of doing with this figure is it's almost like the pictures in a coloring book, right? I'm setting up kind of outlines of areas, shadows, and highlight areas that are already in the art in like one of those, adult coloring books that were all the craze during COVID. Uh, so this really helps pop out the detail. You can see now that his little leather belt here has all kinds of straps, and there's some straps that hold his scabbard. You can see the pommel of his sword a little bit better. It's all starting to kind of pop out at me and show the detail of the skull. This is where the art of the figure is showing itself to you, right? So these sculptors, the talent that's there out in the miniature world, whether they're doing it digitally and creating these for 3D printing or for manufacture in resin printing miniature companies, or if they're doing injection molding with plastics, they can sculpt these in three-dimensional software, uh, do a digital sculpt. I kind of want to get in this brain pan a little bit because it looks pretty dark, so I'm going to kind of force my bristles down in there. And there are still some classic sculptors out there that actually will sculpt these figures at a 28 millimeter scale from two-part putties, green stuff, um, and create these figures in three-dimensional form. And then they're molded and mass produced for us to enjoy and paint and put on our table and hopefully kill and get experience points from, right? Yeah, that's right, Lenny. Sometimes you do got to kind of really get it in there, right? If you really want to hit the right spot. Thanks, Lenny, for making this an adult-oriented show right off the bat. Okay, so I think I'm pretty satisfied with my grays. I might want to get a little bit more on the base down here. You got to be careful not to brush too hard on little fiddly bits that stick out like this scabbard here. Some materials, if you hit this too hard, like especially resin printed minis or more friable plastics, that could snap right off. And then you got to stop your whole process and get to gluing and repairing. And that's no fun. Um, I hate that. I hate breaking, breaking and gluing miniatures. And yeah, Lenny, if you force it, sometimes you can snap something and then you got to fix it. It's no fun. No fun snapping it. All right. I think I'm pretty good. Maybe a little bit more on the inner part of his boot here, just to pop some highlights a little bit. Granted, there's going to be a lot of less light getting underneath here between his legs, right? Because the light is coming down right here on the top of his head, right? So that's going to be the brightest spots. But you're still going to get some light filter down and pop these highlights down here underneath his feet. All right. What do you guys think? That's probably enough gray, yeah? Thanks, Laura. Yeah, like I said, this technique, this slap chop, and you can see why they call it slap chop, because you're just slapping paint in a dry brush, and making those details pop out, right? So now that I've got that mid-tone set with my gray, and again, if I undercoated in a brown, maybe I would do this in a tan, give it more of an earth tone. I've seen some people go crazy with, like if they're painting skin, they might base coat in a purple and highlight up to like a pink to where they get to a white. So you get that kind of skin tone that has that undercurrent of what skin looks like with purples and pinks and blues. That kind of shows that blood is flowing through that skin, right? Um, Me, I stick to this gritty. It does come out kind of gritty looking, but I like that kind of dark, lived-in um, look that the black to gray kind of gives me. Okay, I think we're set for the gray. Uh, I'm not going to clean out my brush. A lot of people will clean out their brush between colors, and you should do that with paint, obviously, right? But we're dry brushing, which means we want all those bristles dry, and we don't want to moisten our paint so that it like goes on in layers. We want it to stay dry and just that pigment pick out the highlight of the model. So I'm going to get my trusty paper towel again. Okay. And this time I'm going to use a white uh, surface primer. There we go right there. This bottle is well used. And I use quite a lot less of this because this is just going to pick out my highlights, my superfine highlights on the model. So I don't want to go as hard as I did on the gray. So put a little bit of this on my palette over here off camera. It's a good thing I'm wearing the protection because I'm already getting this on my fingers. Okay, so again, just a little bit on the ends of the brush. You want to try not to get it all the way up to the metal of the brush. That's the ferrule, I think is the how you say that. You start getting paint up in the ends of the tops of your bristles and into the ferrule, it's going to be very hard to clean out, and your brushes are going to start going to crap. So try to avoid that if you can. With dry brushing, it can be hard. All right, so we're going to get all that excess white off the brush on the paper towel. You probably can't even tell that there's white coming off on the paper towel. But I want to get it to where my bristles look like they haven't even been dipped in paint. Okay. Get that paper towel out of there. And what we're going to do is we're going to start again from the very high points of the model because we're imagining this is creating the light, right? And the light is shining down on his head and shoulders, right? So we're going to start with top down, gentle brushes this time. Not as forceful as the gray because we don't want to overwash the mid-tones that the gray created for us. But now you can see the really high highlights of the cloak are starting to pop out there, like underneath his neck where the cloak is really folded. Down here where the cloak kind of blows out in the wind, you're probably going to have more highlight there. So I like to hit those pretty good with the white. And just keep going down the model, top down. Nice, easy brushes. You don't have to force it as hard as you did with the gray. Yeah. So you can see that rocky base is really starting to pop out. Helps if I stop moving the model around. Yeah, it's going to be really white for those highlights because that's going to be the brightest tone of the figure, right? And then what's going to happen is the magic of those contrast paints or speed paints, the brightest part of the color is going to settle on that and bring out the tone. Okay. Thanks, guys. Yeah, that's I love it too. To me, it's like meditation, right? I can throw in my earbuds and listen to a podcast, which, by the way, Elite Encounters is now a podcast, so I can listen to Elite Encounters previous episodes on Spotify or any of your other podcast platforms that you prefer, and just kind of listen to your show and meditate through painting. Um, and it is art because, uh, granted, another artist has created this model for me, but my technique and my color choice and my use of color theory is going to bring out uh, the life of this model, right? So, I mean, if I wanted to make this guy like a cartoon skeleton from like a Beetlejuice kind of movie, I could. Or if I wanted like really grim, dark, dirty, rotten skeleton, I could. It's up to me as the painter, right? Or you as the painter if you're painting as well. All right, maybe a little bit atop this brain pan here to kind of get that bone edge that's around where his brain used to sit before that poor bastard got partially decapitated. Uh, Kind of like on a certain HBO show about dragons. Okay, so I think this guy, I think maybe a touch more just to really get it bright. Stick in there. Maybe pop that face a little bit more, top of his epaulets, tips of his boots. All right, so now that we're looking at this guy and see the details, what do you think? You think we want to start adding some color to this dude and bring him to life? He's kind of already brought to life, right? If you wanted to have like a kind of a gothic ghost story feel to your adventure, you could paint all your ghosts, undead creatures, skeletons, just in this slap chop style, and put them on the table. And the details enough there to where people can envision what it is they're facing and what it is they're going to have to defeat or die, right? So uh, you could, if you wanted to, stop there. Yeah. Like if this was a ghost or something, like I could, in theory, stop there. But where's the fun in that, right? Okay, so now that I've slap chopped the dude, maybe a little bit more on this guy. I'm going to bring this guy to life a little bit more. Okay. So now I am going to clean off my brush because I don't want this polyurethane acrylic mix sitting in my brushes. It'll dry, it'll get hard, my brush will get ruined, right? And then I got to go run to the store and get more. Again, these are super cheap at most of your retail stores. Okay, that's a good possibility, Laura, is to just leave the bones white like that. Um, well, I do have some colors that will actually make that skeleton look like it's actually been in the ground for a little while and now it's come back to life. You know, those skeletons you see at the doctor's office, those are either fake resin models or they've been cleaned and covered with something to make them study specimens that uh, you know no skeleton is really white unless it's been out in the sun for a long time. Uh, don't ask me how I know that. That's a different show. So yeah, I got a little thing of water here, and for me, I got to keep a lid on my water because I have caught my cat drinking my paint water. Um, Obviously, you don't want anybody to drink your paint water. You're about to ask what? How I know skeletons are not pure white, fresh out the ground? I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes and yeah, I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes and Edgar Allan Poe when I was a kid. Okay, so yeah, just to clean your brushes, you can just kind of rinse them in some clean water and then wipe them out with your paper towel, not your paper towel that you dry brushed on, because that defeats the purpose, right? So anyway, dry brush is nice and clean and put it over here in my brush holder. Yeah, that's true. So kind of like after you eat chicken, the bone like in a chicken thigh or a chicken leg. Kind of has that grayish color to it. And it depends on what you marinated the chicken in, etc. But for me, and for our purposes here, I'm going to use, you know what? I'm going to actually get out a nice clean palette just for us for the show. Yep, it does. The sun bleaches it over time and gets it to that white color. That's why if you're out like hiking or you're like in the desert and you see those classical films where there's a skeleton laying out in the desert, those skeletons are white. All right, so I have tons of dirty palettes that I'm gonna be I'm not gonna use for the show. All right, it's yeah, new palette time. Let me write a theme song about new palettes, and then give that to me for the show. Uh, Not to put you on the spot, Lenny. Um, so I just use these. Like I get these really cheap. I get them by the half dozen for like $1. And they suit my purpose just fine for the kind of paint that I'm going to use. Okay. The first paint that I'm going to use, I'm going to lay down some color on the bones, right? So we've discussed like, hey, bones are gray, they bleach white. Uh, my son painted some skeletons that he wanted to paint like they came out of the peat bog. So they had kind of a greenish brown tone to them. Uh, yeah, a bard song for clean palettes. Let's see, I've got some channel points. Maybe next time. Maybe next time. So one of my favorite paints to use for skeletons is a speed paint called Pallid Bone, right? I mean, that makes sense. Pallid bone. So pale bone. And this is a speed paint that's produced by the Army Painter. You can see that there. Uh, and to kind of know, like, they got a picture on the bottle that kind of tells you, what the tones are. You have your dark tone, your mid tone, and your highlight on the little box here. But sometimes these pictures aren't the greatest, and they don't really show what you're going to get on a model. So I've bought these 3D printed caps to throw on the top of my paint and painted them in that color to really show you what those colors can do. Um, Another example, here's a weird kind of dirty brown green color. But it just depends on what I'm trying to do. For bones, I'm just going to use pallid bone. All right, that sound you're hearing is me shaking the paint because these are, they have multiple pigments that are suspended in the medium. And to really get that separation in multiple tones, you have to thoroughly mix your paint. So all these paints come preloaded with mixing balls by the Army Painter. So thanks for that because otherwise I'd have to drop BBs in every one of my bottles and that sucks. So I'm going to shake this paint. So that's what I'm doing. You might hear some BB clicking around in plastic bottle. Maybe you don't. It's under the desk. You don't know what I'm doing. I'm mixing my paint. All right, so I get my palette here and it's going to start off with a nice, fairly big drop. I swear, that's what I'm doing. Okay, so that's a drop of pallid bone. Now you look at that on screen and it just looks like brown, right? Like it just looks like that's going to come out brown, okay? But what's going to happen is as that paint dries and the heavier pigments are the darker pigments, those are going to seep into the deep parts of the model. I got to stop talking with my hands because I'm glitching out my green screen terribly. But the darker, heavier pigments are going to seep into the deeper parts of the model where the black and dark gray mid-tone and shadow prime still exists, hasn't been blocked out by the white, and settle into that and get really dark brown. And the lighter pigments are going to settle on the higher raised parts of the model, and they're going to be underpainted or underprimed with that white. So they're really going to contrast each other when they go on the model. And I'm going to show you how that works now. So for this guy right here, the bone that's exposed on the model is obviously his skull, right? And his poor little lopped off brain pan. He's got his hand here holding a scabbard. He's got another hand drawing here on the pommel of a sword. And just underneath, it might be hard to make out on camera, but he has his radius and ulna under his bracer is exposed there. Uh, uh, and he does have a couple ribs poking out where his armor has rotted away on his chest. So there's a few places where we're going to hit with this bone color, this pallid bone. Okay. Now to paint with speed paints, a lot of painters that paint in that classic layering technique that I was talking about earlier like using really nice Kolinsky sable brushes. So these are brushes that come to a really nice fine point, and the sable, if you condition it and clean it well, will maintain that point for a long time. Really good detail brushes, they cost you about 12 bucks a pop. Okay. For speed paints, they will wreck your Kolinsky brushes. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to invest a lot of money in high-end brushes to use contrast or speed paints with. It'll just mess up your day. Use those for the layering techniques and the models that you really want to take your time on. Because I'll be honest, when you're speed painting, contrast painting, you're trying to get models out in a quick pace so you can get them on the table for your game. You can get them on the table for your Warhammer tournament where you've got to have your models painted. You don't have a lot of time to sit there and pick out every detail and take your time and make, award-winning models when you've got an army of 40 pieces you got to paint. And that's where these paints really shine, is getting stuff done quick and getting stuff done to where they look really good at a tabletop standard. So when they're at high level at the game table or on a show like Elite Encounters, like our Soul Sever campaign, like the Psychic Promise campaign that's going to be airing next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to check those out and see some of these minis on the table. For these, you're going to want to use just cheap synthetic brushes. I honestly can get a pack of fine detail brushes at any retailer for about $6. So that's the way I go, right? Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. Uh, I think they look pretty cool too. Not to toot my own horn, as they say, but when you see them on camera on our show, when you see them on the table at my games that I play at home or games that my friends play, they look pretty cool, and they really bring the model to life. And I can do it, without having to spend. I mean, I still layer paint in the classic technique, and I could spend a week to 2 weeks on a single model this size, depending on the amount of detail and the amount of paint quality I want to get on the model. So for our purposes, speed paints are a dream come true because if you're like me, you probably have a closet full of unpainted miniatures. If you're a painter hobbyist like me, and it's driving my family crazy because everywhere there's closet space, I've got a box of unpainted minis. Thanks to these kinds of paints, I'm getting through them and getting to where I can make room to buy more unpainted miniatures I could put in that space. Uh, it's a habit. It's an addiction. Okay, so I just got this really cheap synthetic brush here that I got at a big box retailer. Yeah, the slap chop method to produce this priming that pops those models out, and then the speed paint, which I'm about to apply, makes my painting go so much quicker. Where a model like this, if I were to do like layering technique, would take me a few hours to a few days, depending on the amount of time I can spend at my paint desk. Whereas the speed paint, especially if I've got 4 or 5 models that are the same, I can mass produce these and crank out 5 in a 2.5, 3 hour setting, depending on what I'm doing and how much time I like stop to, look at my phone or um, fast forward my podcast to the next episode of Elite Encounters. That's again on a podcast now. Uh, anyway, man, I'm just shameless. So this speed paint, this brown up here that you see, is again pallid bone. So I'm gonna give that a little swirl with my brush. Okay, and I just want enough on there on the tip of the brush. I'm gonna bring it over, and you're gonna see me on my cam lean into my magnifying light here so I can see what I'm doing. So with the speed paints, you can really just kind of slap it on there. Like you don't have to sit there and like color inside the lines, so to speak, right? I've got my outline of his skull, so I'm just going to slap paint on the skull until it's the color I want. Bearing in mind that it's going to dry down, and when it dries, you can see already the dark pigment is going into like the eye sockets, the nasal bone, some of the teeth. They're already starting to pop out, and the color's already starting to be there. The brain pan is already kind of, you know, defined. Okay, piece of cake. Again, I said the ribs were kind of rotting out of his armor, so I'm just going to slap a little bit of paint in there. And I definitely have to use my magnifying lamp for this because it's just a tiny little spot and I don't want to go hog wild and mess up. Because with speed paints, they're a little bit translucent. Okay, they show through. That's why you can see the slap chop prime underneath the paint, right? So if I were to color outside the lines, like if I was to just slap on my skull here and accidentally get some all over his breastplate, when I go to paint his breastplate, this color is going to shine through underneath and you're going to be able to see that. So that's the trick with speed paints that I had to learn early on is you got to color inside the lines once you have them defined. Okay? Not like layer painting with acrylic paints, because if I just slap some bone color on the skull and I accidentally get some bone color on his breastplate, with acrylics I can just paint right over it and you'll never know. That's the beauty of them. You can mask your mistakes. Speed paints, not so much. So if you do color outside the lines, if you do make mistakes, and everybody does, then you can go back with your, you can clean it off. If it's still wet, you can just take a wet brush and just brush it off, right? And then take a dry brush and get off the excess. If it's still, the pigment's still stuck on there, you can let it dry completely and prime over it and then paint over it with a new speed paint. It does take a little extra time, so give yourself some patience and take your time and color inside the lines with these guys, and you won't have to worry about having to fix boo-boos. Okay. All right, so I got a little bit here that I want to put on his hands that are here on his scabbard and drawing the pommel of the sword. And like I said, his radius and ulna are just kind of barely exposed underneath his bracer there. So I'm just going to gently put my bristles in and let the paint flow into the model. That's another great thing about these contrast paints, speed paints, is that they flow really nicely. They're not like a thick acrylic paint like a craft store paint, like apple barrel or something like that, where it comes out like toothpaste. This is really thin and watery, and it will kind of go into your model almost like a wash. So if you're a painter out there and you're used to painting a base coat and then washing it with a darker color to let it seep into those darker parts of the model, this does that for you in one coat, one stroke. I want to make his underneath his cheekbones a little darker. So there you go. You can see it's already kind of starting to dry down, and where there are shadows, the darker pigment goes in the shadows, so that's nice and dark brown. Yes, exactly, Laura. It's more like a stain. That's a great analogy. I don't do a lot of woodworking and staining, but yes, it functions just like that. Okay, so while I've got this, I've still got this nice dot of bone here. So why don't we go to our second dude, and we'll go ahead and get him done while we're at it, right? So two for the price of one. Special bonus on our premiere episode tonight of Barnabas Brushes. And I really want to get a lot of this into the brain pan because it's really dark and I want it to really show that contrast to the rim of the skull bone around the top there. And you just kind of push it around until you feel like, yeah, that looks like a skull to me. And you can see it's still wet and shiny, right, as that resin kind of dries out. We'll do his hands again. And those little pieces of radius and ulna that are exposed under this bracer, just very lightly kind of touch the brush. Let the paint do the work here. All right. Oh, and his rib cage, right? Almost forgot his rib cage. Which, if you do forget a spot, just go back with a fresh drop of the color and boom, paint it in. Okay, and then I want to clean that brush off because I don't want that resin in the paint medium uh, to dry in this brush because that'll ruin the brush, even the synthetic guys. Now, if you do get your brushes all gunked up, there are brush soaps out there that you could pick up at art stores that are good for uh, cleaning up and rejuvenating the bristles in your brush. And I've seen them bring like I had some really gnarly brushes that are brought back to life with this brush soap. So uh, if you find like your brushes are starting to get really kind of like, here's a really good whacked out brush, right? Looks like he got up on the wrong side of the bed. I use this for all kinds of sloppy painting, right? I clearly am not going to be able to get any detail with this guy if you look at how whacked out those bristles are. The camera's not going to want to focus on it. But I can rejuvenate this brush with some brush soap if I wanted. So to clean my brushes in between colors, just some water, right? Clean water and a paper towel to dry it off, right? And dry it without, like, you don't want to mush your bristles like this. You want to just pinch it and wipe it like that to maintain the shape of your brush. So you don't have to have any special cleaner because these are water-based paints, right? Your acrylics are water-based. So nice clean water will rinse it out and then you can wipe it out. Now, if you really want to give it a good deep clean between sessions, then again, using the brush soap, like I mentioned. I'll show you what the brush soap I use. I picked this up at art and hobby stores. Um, it looks like something you get at the old general store in a Western movie. That works wonders. This can has saved several of my brushes. Hey, Peliquin, thanks for joining, bud. Okay, so this guy is starting to dry down, and the guy that we had, you can see he's pretty much dried down, and the detail of that bone has kind of popped out. That brain pan is still a little wet because there's a lot of paint in there. Um, that's all right. We're not going to paint on there anymore. We're going to start doing some other colors on this guy with the time we have left. I'm thinking I'd like to kind of start with the leathers that are on this guy. So um, a lot of models that have multiple leather pieces, I might try to use one or two different leather colors. Uh, but this guy, I don't know, he's got like a cravat, and this guy was probably fancy in life, so I'm guessing his leathers probably matched in life even. So I think what I'm going to do is his boots and his scabbard, and maybe this leather belt here that's kind of holding his sword scabbard. We'll probably do all in the same leather, just to give him some matching quality. And he looks like he has some leather bits here that holds his bracers on. But I might pick that out in a different leather, give it a more supple leather look. Yes, thanks very much for those bits, Peliquin. Remind me again, that name is from the Clive Barker movie, right? Nightbreed. Yeah. Yeah. I try to do that because, again, I said I can paint this like some kind of Beetlejuice character with like some purple boots and like, pink pants, whatever. Um, it just depends on the kind of story you're trying to tell on your table. And for me, these undead, these guys were, you know, warriors for a good cause or maybe a bad cause, and some necromantic energy has brought them to undeath. So these poor bastards with half their head cut off. Yeah, yeah. This guy, I mean, yeah, this guy was fancy pants. I mean, you don't wear a cravat into battle unless you're fancy pants, right? Okay. So for the leather, I think for the boots and the scabbard, I'm going to go with a darker brown. Um, kind of experimenting here. So again, these paints come preloaded with a mixing ball. You want to mix the pigments in the. Everybody needs some fancy pants, right? Uh, Mix that uh, pigment up into that. Um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Matrix, right? The medium. There we go. The medium. Mix that pigment into the medium, so that's why you hear those mixing balls rattling. I swear, I'm mixing the paints. Cue mixing paint song. Okay, so I've got this dark brown here that the paint is actually called dark wood, but it's a nice dark rich brown. Okay. Another cool thing I can do with these speed paints that I haven't really talked about is I can paint them over actual acrylic paints like a wash. So we talked about washes or stains earlier. So if I wanted a nice rich leather, I can take a like a medium brown and kind of base coat the model where I want the leather to be. And then I can take my speed paint, like there's a speed paint called hard leather, and I can use that over that base coat and it'll act like a wash. The darker pigment will seep into the shadows and the lighter pigment will kind of give a tone to that leather undercoat. And it makes it look like from a flat brown color to like a well-worn baseball mitt, right? When I think of these guys out battling these soldiers that are wearing these boots, this armor, it's going to be worn leather. It's not going to be nice, shiny right out of the package from the boot store. Uh, they're going to get scuffed up. They're going to have dark stains on them. So these speed paints can give a layer of life and lived inness to your model. So I'm going to take this dark wood, and I'm going to do the boots real quick, and maybe the scabbard. So again, get a good on your brush, and you can just color on the boot. Don't go onto the pants, because then you'll have to fix the pants. Just the boot. Okay. And as that dries down, you can see that the maybe a little bit more light. You can see that the higher parts of the boot where that white highlight is going to take that lighter part of that brown paint, and the shadows are going to be a very rich dark brown where that leather is folded in. So if you're, wearing leather boots or leather jacket, when you move around in it and it wrinkles up, you can tell that that black leather jacket is 3 or 4 different colors depending on how the light's hitting it, right? It's definitely black in the shadows, in the creases, but the top might be gray or even white depending on how supple and how patent that leather is. All right, let's do the other boot. Okay, and now that we're looking at that, that's pretty dark. I don't know. Do we want to keep the scabbard and the other leather on this guy just as dark? I don't know. Maybe his scabbard would be a little bit lighter. What do you guys think? I want to do the other guy's boots while we think about that. Right? Okay, and just like that, his boots are done. Right? So I have the highest highlights have that kind of rich dark brown. And let's brace it a little bit better. And where the leather is wrinkled in, it's a very dark brown, right? Yeah, I agree, Pelican. I think the scabbard, I should go a little bit lighter on the leather. It's just a little dark on those boots for my taste. Um, but that's the fun of playing around with miniature painting, is you can try something, and if you don't like it, do something different next time. Speaking of next time, we only have a couple minutes left. So what I'd like to do next time, I'm going to continue working on these models next episode. So I'd like for everyone who, yeah, I know, it went by really fast, didn't it? Um, but I think we can probably finish these guys up next episode, at least the guys we've got started, right? Maybe at least their armor and stuff. Bases we always say for last, I do. And then what we'll do is maybe next time we'll have, think about it. When you think about this guy as this kind of fancy pants duelist with his cravat, we're going to think about what color we want to paint his pants, right? And think about what color we want to paint that leather breastplate he's wearing. And then this cloak that's got these really cool cloak clasps that attach to his leather breastplate. Okay. Yeah, we can mix and match. We can do a couple that are my choice and have a couple that are your choice. And sure, yeah, if we want to do a Ray Laura, yeah, if we can find another painting channel, that'd be cool. If not, whatever you feel like. But thanks everybody for coming in and tuning in. Be sure to check out Elite Encounters live play of Pathfinder 2nd Edition on Tuesdays on Twitch on this same channel, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. And you can check us again on YouTube. The videos on demand drop on Fridays that week. If you can't catch us live, we understand people got lives, but catch us on the replay on YouTube at your leisure. And if you can't sit down and look at a screen for a couple hours, that's cool too. Throw your earbuds in, listen to us on podcast, Spotify, that's my favorite. Any of your favorite podcast platforms, you can now check us out. Episodes are loading in sequential order. So we're going to catch up to where the show is, and then they'll be on pace with the show once we get caught up. So thanks everybody for coming. Thanks everybody for the interaction and helping me choose some colors on these guys. I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. See you next time on Barnabas Brushes. Good evening. Yeah, that's true. On the podcast, you got to check us out via searching for Soul Severed, the name of the actual campaign that is live on the podcast. Thanks, Lenny. Appreciate it. These guys are going to really come together with the colors we choose next time. We're going to really bring these guys to life. Thanks, Peliquin. Good night, everyone.